You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the prophets.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar M. Khatib.
Everybody, welcome back to the show. And as you can tell, I'm not in my estate library. I'm joined by my very good friend and my very good friend, Henry Peck. And I guess like partner as well. We'll talk more about that. Not the partner you guys are thinking about, but Henry, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's great to see you.
Great to see you too.
We're gonna have a lot of fun here.
I agree. I'm glad we're the partners that you're talking about, because I think Ilkin would be pretty mad at me if we were the other kind of partners.
Yeah,
probably wouldn't be so good.
But what's really nice, and we'll get into it in a moment. We got a lot to cover. Is that our friendship, sort of evolved over a very short amount of time when we think about it. But it's just funny how things turn out in life. Including today's episode, which I gotta say is hilarious, because it sounds like the start of a really bad joke, which is like a Muslim and Jew walk into a Christian podcast studio to record a MedTech episode. But shout out to the Christian Podcast Network for hosting us today, and if you are interested, definitely go check out their podcast. It's a great one. So Henry, let's get into the first thing, which is like tell us a little bit about yourself, because you are and again, I've interviewed a lot of people in this industry. I think you're a one of people who knew from the very beginning, I'm going to be in medtech.
Yeah, I think that's certainly how I feel. I'm from New York originally, born on Long Island, raised on the East Coast in the DC area. And whether it was the surgeries that I went through as a child or my family experience, I did know from a pretty young age that medtech was where I wanted to go. I think a lot of kids think they want to be doctors, and they get a lot of exposure to medicine. And I know we kind of bonded over that experience that you had as, a med school elite turned dropout. For me, I remember being young and having this rare neurodegenerative condition in my eyes. So when you go to the eye doctor, you know how they move their fingers like this and then they have you follow it up? I didn't have the muscles and nerves that allowed my eyes to follow the finger up. And what would have happened if I didn't have the surgeries I had, which at the time were pretty experimental, was eventually I would have been shut-eyed, so legally blind. My parents were told I would never be able to drive a car when I was born. And so I had these surgeries, when I was a baby, and then when I was a toddler, and of course later into high school. But I remember being young, and they did the surgery, and I remember being like, how did they do that? It was crazy to me. So I was really fascinated with medicine and just healthcare technology at a young age. And it helped that my father sold medical devices for Ethicon. So he's had a long career working in Janssen and Mentor and Ethicon, and now over at Horizon Pharma. So he's always been on the sales side of the space. And, I like to joke, like when kids have their bedtime stories, maybe they're reading Harry Potter or something like that. My dad and I used to have this little thing where he would take me inside the operating room, and that would be my bedtime story. So I was learning about medical devices and things like that at a young age. I went on to do engineering at Carnegie Mellon, and that was where I kind of cut my teeth in actually building these devices. I started in the prosthetic space, exoskeletons and rehabilitation robotics, worked at Exobionics a little bit in college, and then kind of found my way out of rehabilitation into surgery, where I worked with Intuitive Surgical and some other startups in the space before making the leap over full-time to Auris Health. Was with the Auris Health team through the acquisition integration into J&J, spent some time there, and then it was personal passion and a growing interest in the neurology space that brought me out of J&J and into a startup in the digital diagnostics and Alzheimer's space. Started to kind of widen my field of view, focus more on venture, strategy, all the underpinnings of not just building like a great medical device, but building a great business. And that love for the innovation ecosystem is what led me to LSI and what we're doing now. So kind of a fun little journey there, certainly non-linear, everything from engineering, manufacturing, product, marketing, a little bit of commercial to kind of get to this point, but definitely have always had a love for the medical device, med tech, health tech community, and I don't think I'll ever do anything else.
No, I hear you. And, I want to go back a little bit in time, so I can't remember the year. Maybe it was 2019. What was the
Yeah.
year that? Yeah, 2019. So for me at the time, I was the head of growth marketing over at Potrero. So I was the first person in our industry to take on like a growth title. I was very keen on introducing this role and concept in our industry around how to use marketing and growth strategies to really own pipeline and grow revenue. And I always get a lot of like in mail, a lot of messages from people who want mentorship, who want advice and everything. And I try my best to answer them. But a lot of them are, to be honest with you, a waste of my time because most people don't take my advice. A lot of people, they want the advice, but they don't act on it. And so you sent me this very formal and very well written message, which
Like they tell you to do in the career center at your university.
I mean, yes. And so I read it and I was like, okay. And so I reached out to you. We talked. You're an engineer. First of all, what made you send that message? Because we have a lot of young people who listen to this show, and I'm always trying to get them to listen to people who have paved their own pathway in a very unique way and in a successful way. And like, what kind of like pearls of wisdom can you impart? So
Yeah.
first of all, what made you reach out? What were you looking for at that time?
Yeah, so I was at Intuitive my summer after my junior year, and
As an intern.
As an intern. So after my junior year of college, I interned at Intuitive, and I remember the process of getting that internship at the time. I had done research. I had worked at a company in the Bay Area with Exobionics, and when I kind of I saw the Da Vinci research kit for the first time the start of my junior year, and I fell in love. I was like, this is it. This is the thing I'm going to be doing forever. I don't think there was anything in the world that could have kept me from getting an internship that summer at Intuitive. I would have swept the floors if I had to. Would have watered the plants. Like, I wanted an internship at Intuitive more than I think anyone has ever wanted to work at Intuitive Surgical. And I ended up getting this unique internship co-op opportunity. At the time, they had Da Vinci Xi out. They were still on the EndoWrist stapler, which is the old version of their surgical staplers. They were going to launch SP that summer. And they were also going to launch the Sureform 60, which was the new, longer stapler that was going to be designed with the new wrist technology, the new sensing technology. And we could go into the whole arc of surgical stapling. It's one of my favorite parts of robotic surgery and laparoscopic surgery. But all this to say, I was at Intuitive, and I thought this was endgame. I was like, I'm going to work here until I die. That summer, I'd always liked this idea, like these hackathons that colleges do. And so I did this hackathon at Johns Hopkins, and I met a young woman about my age when we were starting the team formation process who was bilaterally deaf in both ears, and she wore cochlear implants. That was really my first exposure to that technology. If you're not familiar, it's a neuroprosthetic essentially that transmits sound from the outside of the ear directly to stimulate the nerve in the brain, bypassing what would normally be used for hearing. We built a software algorithm that could be used in the tuning process of those implants. Think about it like this. If you can't see and I put glasses on you and say, better, worse, 1, 2, you're like, I don't know, I can't see. So the idea was for patients that are receiving these cochlear implants, the tuning process could be more algorithmic and in response to empirical data from brain signals rather than human interpretation of what's good hearing. This was a hackathon project that turned into something a little bit more, started to get deeper in the deaf community and learned a lot more about the nuances around that community and what makes technology in that space both really interesting and also potentially really challenging. But all this to say, we won this hackathon. We got this, exciting invitation from an incubator in the Bay Area. We were doing this thing. And I was, kind of at Intuitive around that. I was like, this is pretty cool. I didn't know I could do this. You mean instead of building this one medical device, I could, because I go to this incubator and they're like, what's your business plan? What's your commercialization strategy? How are you going to position this to investors? I was like, I just know how to build medical devices. Don't look at me. So we had to kind of figure this stuff out real time. And that was what really kind of kicked me in the butt, was like, hey, maybe as much as you love this surgical robotics thing that you're doing in Intuitive, you should widen your field of view. You're at a university that facilitates entrepreneurship, is known for startups, and has good connections to venture capital. You should learn more. You should get your head out there a little bit. And that's when I really started kind of prospecting the world of healthcare startups. And in that process, I started to learn a little bit more about what makes these things actually work. And while engineering and fantastic product is at the center of it, it doesn't work without the other legs of the stool. The commercialization, the regulatory, the market access and reimbursement. And I really enjoyed, starting to find people in these pockets that I could identify as experts in those different legs that make the stool stand. And you were one of the people that I found kind of on that growth marketing side of things that I didn't really know much about at the time. So I figured a thoughtful reach out. You were one of 1,000 people I was reaching out to at that point, but I was really excited to, learn a little bit more. And as you said, once you gave me a little bit of guidance at that time, 6 years ago, I took it. And that was always, I think that's one of the things I hear from people all the time that, in the process of advising startups, being on boards, or just talking to other young professionals, it's like, if I give you advice, you got to use it, implement it, and then come back to me and tell me what you learned. And so that was precisely what I did. And that was, I think, the start of our relationship, which later turned into a friendship as paths started to cross in more ways than one.
100%. And I think the part that I really love is that, it started off, as a mentorship, like I was mentoring you on marketing stuff, and growth and everything. But very quickly it turned into sort of a mutual mentorship. You've mentored me on a lot of things, and I come to you to this day for a lot of advice. Actually, even on my own business, I'll never forget earlier this year, you were the very first person that I went to of all the network of all the people that I know to say, hey, Henry, like, here's what I'm thinking in my business model. Like, what do you think, right? And I want to point something out. So, like, on the advice part, so you, I think at that point, I was looking to hire somebody, so I gave you some things to do. You're learning and everything, I believe. Right?
Yeah, it's like a year later. I know what you're talking about.
And I wanted to hire a growth marketing manager. And you reached out and you're like, Omar, I really want to apply for this. And I mistakenly, because it was a mistake, I told you, I was like, dude, because at the time, like, I was trying to backfill things that I was not good at, right? And I was like, dude, I can't be experimental with this. You don't have the experience for this. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, I was like, how many times in my career did someone tell me the exact same thing?
And by the way, that's one of my favorite things to hear in the world is I don't have the experience, because nothing gets me. I'm not a petty person, but I am really competitive. And nothing gets me more excited to do something than when someone says, you don't have experience or you don't know how to do this. It motivates me to learn. And that, I know where we're going here. And that precisely is what, kind of what happened.
And so I have that chip on my shoulder, and I was like, I'm not going to do that to Henry. So I was like, okay. So I gave you, I think, for those who are interested, 3 very specific books. It was Traction by Gabriel Weinberg, who founded DuckDuckGo, Hacking Growth by Sean Ellis, and I think what was it?
Crossing the Chasm.
And Crossing the Chasm. That's, of course. I think I started you on that. That's how every mentorship for me starts, is reading that book. And I was like, read those. Oh, and then I told you to go get like an inbound certification from HubSpot, which was free, just to understand that process. And you came back within like 3 weeks and told me like, oh, I'm done. And I remember talking to you, and I was like, he actually did this. Like, I didn't think you'd do it, because nobody does. And then it to a point that even at the time my agency partner, who's still like a good friend of mine, and we co-host now a weekly marketing show together, Orette Davis. Yeah. I told Orette, I'm like, hey, I really want to hire this guy, but I feel like I'm so biased because I love this guy. I believe in him and everything. Can you interview him? Like, am I wrong? And he interviews you, and he came back to me. He's like, dude, this guy gets it. He's like, the only thing is that he hasn't like actually implemented these strategies himself, but like he understands it. You should do it. Needless to say, it didn't work out because I ended up leaving Potrero. Right. You ended up moving on. But that, I felt like it was a launching pad for you, because you went on to Altoida and did a lot of great things, not only closing these like multi-million-dollar farmer deals, but getting involved in a variety of different parts of the business. Can you like talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a fun transition.
You were doing a lot of stuff over there. That was it was a good launching pad for you.
Yeah, and I had, great mentors around me when I left J&J that started, that stayed in touch and kept supporting me, people that had kind of been there and done that, like the Josh DeFonsos and my good buddy Alex Hassan and Marissa Cressetti, who I ended up getting to work with later. But that I think I made this joke to you a couple years back where I was like, I think the Oris mafia is kind of like what the PayPal mafia was in big tech.
Oh, I totally
Where you
agree.
look at the genesis of, the next wave of healthcare technology and med tech companies, and a lot of them have people who have their roots at that company. So I was just so fortunate to get to work at Oris when I did, kind of like catch the magic piece of that wave before it became a larger part of J&J, which had its own fantastic set of experiences, but it was very different than what I joined at at kind of the tail end of that wave. But yeah, and I will say for many reasons, it was the best thing ever that I didn't come work at Potrero with you at that time, because it left me with like more curiosity to go out and explore this kind of thing, both inside my work and outside with the community building that we were doing on Clubhouse, which I know is a blast from the past, but taking this nascent platform and being like, I think I can apply some of these learnings to building community here.
And that was in the start of 2020, I think.
Yeah.
And this is, again, the theme here that I really want to touch on for a lot of the professionals listening is the idea of when you hear something, taking it and taking action on it. So one of those things, that we talked about when I said, I'm leaving Potrero, it's not going to work out. I remember telling you that I was like, look, you learned all this great stuff and you get it. Don't wait to go to a company. Go actually find a way to implement it. And you took that advice to heart. And yet again, Henry Peck implements it at like insane scale.
I think it's a personality thing. I will say, like, this is something that I can't take credit for this idea, but I love the 20 VC podcast with Harry Stebbins, and something he says when he looks at founders is that he always asks them where they first made money, and no founder, he says, makes their first money after 4 years at McKinsey, 2 years at HBS, and then they come out and start a successful company, right? It just doesn't happen. And I think like I'm a big believer in like these sandboxes, right? Whenever I was doing something, I was always trying to learn something else outside of it, no matter what it was. When I was at Exobionics and my role was in mechanical engineering, I was trying to break my way into the human factors engineering side of the business. When I was at Intuitive and I was doing manufacturing, I was trying to learn the clinical engineering side. And when I was at Oris doing clinical engineering, I was trying to learn the product management. I was always trying to kind of find these sandboxes to keep learning. And this Clubhouse thing was a sandbox to play around with some of the things that you would showed me in growth. And yeah, we ended up growing a really nice community from 0 to 100,000 in not that long of time. Yeah, we had outstanding
and a
guests.
lot of great sessions and everything. It was like during 2020, it was kind of the epicenter of our industry, to be honest with you.
Yes, I like to think we have the epicenter of the industry back now with LSI.
I was going to say yes. You moved
we definitely
the epicenter. Yeah.
We moved the epicenter. Let's say it like that. But no, I mean, Scott.
But during let's just be honest. Like during the pandemic, there wasn't really a virtual online meeting place for people to exchange information and everything. And it was not only just for the industry; it was for like clinicians, etc. It was great. It
was a cool thing to do, and then those learnings parlayed nicely into what we were doing at Altoida. I think the in a nutshell, part of the reason why it was great that I did that was this growing interest in the neurology and neurological disease space. At the time, we were watching my grandmother progress pretty rapidly with Alzheimer's, and I just, as a student, of this whole space and industry, that was just like, I've got to learn about this. I've got to figure out what's going on. I need to not just like, obviously we need to be there from a human perspective, but I need to understand the pathology of this disease. I need to understand how it affects men and women differently. I need to understand what diagnostics are available, what treatments are available, what's happening in the device segment, what's pharma doing, all these things. And in the process of doing all of that research and getting really deep in it, I kind of converged on a thesis that better biomarkers of disease would be the key to unlocking more effective diagnostics, demonstrating efficacy of novel treatments, and therefore end up helping more patients in the long run. And this kind of missing key was the biomarker, personalized precision medicine, digital phenotyping, et cetera, of disease that we can do in oncology, for example. And so I was, one of the first U.S. employees brought into Altoida. They had kind of a founding management team in Europe, a U.S. CEO, and I joined shortly after that. And yeah, like you said, that for me was like the do everything at this startup to make it work kind of thing.
And you did.
And it was,
I remember.
we had some good success while I was there. I was very fortunate. We were able to secure FDA breakthrough device designation. We extended our Series A round and raised capital from both new investors and inside investors, strategics, VCs, pharma companies like ASI, systems like Honor Health, VCs that were there from the inception to new VCs that we brought in both in the US, Europe, Canada. So it was a really, complete picture of that ecosystem. And then again, it was like early stage. Well, I'm not the chief scientific officer. I'm not the chief medical officer, the chief technology officer, and someone's got to get on the phone and try and sell this pharma deal. So I did that for a while, and we were able to close some really interesting, kind of tranched arrangements for early stage assets in the Alzheimer's space, start extending some partnerships to conduct new research in Parkinson's and other neurodegenerative diseases. And that was really an exciting launching off point for me to be able to do the scrappy early stage startup thing, of course, with a lot of good guidance from people that I had been fortunate to connect with both virtually and physically through my first job at J&J and even prior. So that was a fun thing. And I think part of what I lean on heavily now at LSI.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because the one thing that I love is you have a very non-linear path in your career, and something that for me, I resonate with that. What do you feel like that's been sort of the theme or key to your ability to find success and transition? Because you're a product leader, an engineer. You moved over into marketing, then you're doing all kinds of things at Altoida, and now you start off as the VP of Growth over at LSI. You were recently, congratulations, promoted to Chief Business Officer. We're going to get to that in a moment. What do you think? I have a hypothesis as to what made Henry Peck so successful, but I'm wondering what you think.
Well, I think I'm far from being so successful, but I think
hey, just take the compliment, man. You are successful. And the reason why I say that is that because it's not necessarily because of the titles that you have, but more importantly, the caliber of people who are in your circle, who speak highly of you, who go to you for advice. I see it from that perspective. But because you're being super humble, I'll give you what I think makes.
Tell me your hypothesis, and then let me test it.
What I believe, because keep in mind, as your good friend, I've watched you over the last few years.
Sure, you've been watching me.
I've been watching you, and we've had many conversations. And of course, I've seen this. Henry Peck never changed. Henry Peck evolved over the years, right? And so the reason why I see this is because when somebody, let me dive into what I mean by that. Sometimes you'll see someone change, they go and they go get an MBA and then they change. They go in one person, they come out another person, right? When you evolve, it's this real-time thing that as you're going, you're stacking skill upon skill upon skill, and then you have the skill stack that you can't just go and find, right? So what I noticed, venture capital is a great example of that in terms of how you dove into it. You have this superpower where part of it, I think, is this chip on the shoulder where it's if you don't have experience, that you're let me show you, just hold my beer, right? Of learning, which is whether it's through online videos, books, talking to people, you'll go and figure it out through intense, maybe a week or two of intense focus, and somehow you come out as if you've been doing it for years, and you're not BSing it, you embody it, right? That's where I think your superpower lies.
I appreciate it. I think there's, I guess, not citing any individual superpowers per se, but I think some of the things kind of building on what you said, I never fancied myself all that smart. I don't think I'm ever the smartest one. But I am, like you said, I am fully dedicated to learning. I remember when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I went in my senior year, or I took out of my senior year of high school into college, And it's a weird thing. I remember this so vividly, but you never forget this kind of feeling. You know, I'm a good student in high school. Things come easy to me. Fortunate to get into a top engineering program. I'm all excited. I walk in, you know, engineering, physics, or whatever class. I'm like, yeah, so good at physics in high school. It's going to be a breeze. First test comes, you know, a couple weeks. I'm out doing whatever my first few weeks of college, not really focused on this first test per se. First test comes back. I take the test. I leave, and I'm like, that wasn't so good. Test comes back the next day, and we're in class. I get my test. It's like a D-. I look at the guy next to me, A+. Guy on my left, A++. I'm like, there's a lot of smart kids here. Like, I am not all that intelligent. I'm going to really have to figure out another way to win. And not that I'm competing with the people next to me, but I'm going to have to figure out a way to do something that I never really had to do. And for me, I think it's a combination of like, I'm very dedicated to learning. It's one of the reasons I love what I'm doing now. I get exposure to thousands of startup companies, to thousands of global investors, strategics, and more data and information than I could possibly parse through if I tried. And I just like, I love that. For me, it's like, you know, the image of like Scrooge McDuck playing around in the gold coins. That's like me with all the information in medtech. I love it. It's exactly what I want. And as someone who just like is dedicated to learning, like that for me is my currency. I think there's some other things too that go along with that. It's one thing to be a good learner, but it's another thing to put yourself in situations where you can learn. I think even to this day, of course, you have to be protective of your time. It's your greatest resource and whatnot. But I was never the person who said no. I always was looking for ways to put myself in new situations, whether that was like during the day, I'm a clinical engineer at Auris working with surgeons, developing new features, trying to patent new control systems on our laparoscopic surgical robot. And then at night, I'm running medtech-oriented social events on a digital platform for thousands of people that I've never met in person before, right? I always try to kind of put myself in these new niches and new situations. When COVID happened, I did a hackathon with the MIT Hacking Medicine crew and helped try to spin out an idea for genomic pooling for COVID testing to increase efficiency out of that hackathon into a real company. Like, I was always willing to go into these new things. And for me now, it's like I get paid to do that. Like, that's what I get paid to do at LSI is we're continuing to explore new things, broaden this global mission, work with these exciting companies. So it's that, which I think is number one, you know, being a good learner and putting yourself in situations to learn. You got to work hard to do it. I always say, like, if I had a job where I worked 40 hours a week, I would have a second job outside of that job. That's just my personality. I want more. And then I think one of the other sides to it is maybe this comes with the territory of being an engineer. I'm a big believer in the engineering way of thinking and the training. And there are so many incredible frameworks, particularly, you know, ones inside the medtech world, like what Dr. Mackauer has done with Stanford Biodesign. You know, reading that textbook cover to cover is one of the best things I think any young engineer can do. But you get these frameworks for how to approach problems, how to think, and you can apply those in a lot of different areas of your life, whether that is in other verticals outside of engineering, or even when I was in my university system, I was really good at working the system. Like, I figured out a way to not have to do intro level chemistry because that would take too much of my nighttime away doing labs that I didn't want to do. And instead, I got a part-time remote internship working for the MedX accelerator team out of Israel on, you know, diligencing new minimally invasive medical devices. Like, I was good at working the system to find ways to make it work for me. And I think that's one of my other skills, not gaming systems, but understanding how like complex processes work. Whether you're in an organization, you're trying to understand how that organization works, you're looking at a complex device or business and you're trying to understand how that works. Like, if you give me the blueprints for something and enough time, I can figure out how it works. And that's one of the other things that I think has taken me a little further than if I was just really, really smart and knew a bunch of knowledge, had a bunch of knowledge, knew a bunch of information, was like quick-witted, but I wasn't really good at breaking things down and getting to like the so what of it.
And I think that's important to point out, especially operating, through engineering frameworks, even especially I would say like first principle thinking, right? Because then you're very good and attuned to solving problems, and some of the most important problems in the world, like there isn't really a specific like path or textbook and everything, right?
No.
And I think that's the most important thing. I think especially these days with how fast, like we're at a point in society where technology is advancing so much faster than human beings are, right? It's hard to keep up even with adopting these new things. And I think that being able to the ability to evolve and adapt to these situations, see problems from a different lens, and of course have first principle thinking allows you to kind of, I don't want to say exploit, but find different opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Which leads me to we have to give a shout out to, in my opinion, one of the like best guys in our industry, especially when it comes to finding young talent. And that is the great and powerful Scott Pentel, who's going to hate that I said that because he's so humble and down to earth.
Yeah.
But let's face it, when he reached out to you and I, and this was it 2020? 2021,
yeah.
right? Henry Peck was not Henry Peck yet. Omar Khatib was not Omar Khatib. We're just two guys in the industry that relatively somewhat known on LinkedIn, but that's it. Reaches out to us, invites us to LSI, right? As his guest and everything. And from back then,
You got invited as his guest?
You didn't get invited as his guest?
No, I went because Josh DeFonso told me it'd be good for my startup. Kidding. Scott knows that story, but I knew you were invited. I'm joking around with you.
Well, anyways, but the point is, man, you had to throw me a curveball like that.
Of course.
No, but like
You look too good all stationary. You got
I appreciate that. You had to bring that out of me. But no, I think what was interesting is how the world works in these funny ways of bringing people like that together.
Yeah.
Right? And what's interesting is that like back then, Scott really, really wanted to hire you. You were really focused on Altoida. Scott wanted to hire me. I was doing my own thing, right? And in some ways, Scott kind of got what he wanted in the end because like you're now his
Scott always gets what he wants in the end. I'll tell you that.
Man, I'm not employed by LSI, but I might as well be because I'm we're partners now, and I think the world of LSI and anything I can do to help LSI in the mission, I will. But that being said, just to kind of round things out on your career path and everything before we talk about some of the interesting things that LSI is doing in the market data and stuff. You were at a crossroads in your career, and I remember this, which is you're getting ready to leave Altoida, and at the time, from my vantage point, you had all kinds of cards to play. Your stock was very hot. You had really interesting companies throwing very big titles at you with a lot of money and equity. All right, I hope you don't mind me saying that, but it's true. Okay,
your guess is as good as mine, I suppose.
And I remember you and I, you were really, not stressed out. You're wrestling with this idea like what to do next.
Yeah.
Right. And because your career path was very much like mine in the sense that you hopped around into different roles and everything. It wasn't like Henry starts at like junior engineer and then senior and then at some point you're the head of R&D or something, right?
Well, those kind of paths give me the heebie-jeebies. So yeah,
I'm with you.
I certainly wasn't there for that.
Yeah, but I remember we were talking about the opportunity to go to LSI, right? Because it was kind of this this wild card, right? And I remember telling you that, hey, like here's like my like 2 cents of advice is that. Henry Peck is gonna be fine. Whether it doesn't matter who it was, like people would have hired you just because of your tenacity, your talent, right? And so my thing was like, look, you should go and work for Scott Pentel, and you should go and do this role at LSI because worst case scenario it doesn't work out, and like 2 years later, you go back into the industry, you go work at some company as a VP. So there'll be people to hire you, right? The other side of it is that Henry Peck engineers a role that only Henry Peck can do, And Henry Peck starts, instead of running like 20, 30, 40% Henry Peck, is running 100% Henry Peck speed.
And for
your
anyone who's
life
listening,
changes.
he does refer to me in the third person, even when we talk outside of this podcast.
That
So
is very
it's
true.
not that weird, but
Yeah.
I remember those conversations, and I think maybe just back up a second. So like one of the things that you said a moment ago was around you're talking about like technology adoption and all the way back to that part of the lead into this question. And I think it kind of ties in nicely to this, which is one thing that I think I notice and I really love about certain people in our industry is like I respond really well to people that have like a thesis for how the world is going to work. Right? So just take like AI right now, for example. We're not going to make this a whole AI podcast, but there's like a lot of people who are generally excited and generally interested and all that kind of stuff, enthusiasts and all that. But there are some, I don't necessarily know which thesis is right or which thesis I buy into, but there are people that have this thesis that we are going to be ruled by AI and AI is going to do this, that, the other thing. It's going to integrate in every workflow, take over everything. And then there are people that have this thesis of the model is flattening out and not getting that much better. And maybe we've seen kind of this. And I find those to be really compelling to listen to. And I bring that back to MedTech because I think you need a thesis for how the world works. And that was when I was looking at what to do next. And I was fortunate that through my time in the startup community, I had met a lot of really exciting people that were building really exciting stuff, investors that had really unique theses. And it was those people that really had a strong conviction around a thesis for how the world was going to work. And part of what drew me to LSI was honestly that I think Scott had one of the strongest theses of how the world is going to work and how LSI is going to fit into it of anyone I'd ever met. And it kind of, like you said, wild card in the sense that it wasn't a medical technology startup or a venture fund, which was kind of where my mind was at the time. But his conviction around the need for smarter decision-making in the industry and stronger relationships and partnerships between executives, that being the foundation of what would drive the industry forward, that was something I really bought into. And, you can, of course, talk about the incredible person he is, the incredible mentor he is, the incredible leader he is, how loved he is in the space. But it was really that conviction that this is what the industry needs in order to advance, and this is the role LSI is going to play in that. And I was like, sign me up.
Yeah,
that was what I want. And it's funny. I remember that conversation, and I could tell you that I knew that in order to deliver, one thing you can think about sometimes is like, how long does it take to really deliver on this vision, right? I knew that delivering on this vision was not a 2-year endeavor. Scott likes to joke that LSI is in year 18 of its 5-year plan, and that's because the mission has continued to evolve as the industry has changed around it, as the needs have become more dynamic, as the space is just changing. It was not going to be a short mission, and I wouldn't have it any other way. So that was a lot of kind of what, gave me clarity at that crossroad of what to do next. Because regardless of what the title or the location or anything, like what I'd be doing, like regardless of any of that, I was just looking for another mission that I could believe in and a person that had really strong conviction around that mission and a thesis for how that mission was going to impact the world around it. That was what really took me in the direction that I'm in now. And we are continuing to walk down the yellow brick road with this that Scott laid out, and he's thinking like he thinks 15 years ahead. I think I do a really good job of playing the pieces on the checkers board. Scott's playing 4-dimensional chess when it comes to how what we're doing is going to impact the industry, and the things that he said 2 years ago are coming to fruition now. And I'm just so excited about all that's going to come to fruition over the next however many years of us doing this together.
Oh, absolutely. And I think like just a testament to the value LSI brings. I can't think of that many other organizations where if they were to disappear, like I would very much miss them. And I think if anything, the events and the partnerships and community that LSI's built is one of the reasons why I decided when I wanted to start my own business that I said I want to stay in medtech.
Yeah.
I never thought of it like that, but that's actually very true. That when I started it, LSI was one of maybe 2 or 3 major variables as to why I said, yeah, no, I actually want to stay in medtech. And Scott,
Yeah, if you leave medtech, you can't come to the Waldorf Astoria in Dana Point, Omar. It doesn't work that way.
Definitely not. But and especially as a small business owner, like knowing Scott's story, his family, he's like a man of values and everything. It's so inspiring, and especially like I can't imagine the amount of stress. I mean, I can't imagine. I know though from what he's told me, the amount of stress he went through, especially 2021, the year that you and I went, because I was coming right out of COVID and doing this event at the Ritz-Carlton, and all, nobody knew what was going to happen. And he could have easily just been like, hey, not going to take this risk. We're going to cancel it and just not do this anymore. And he stuck to his, stuck to the mission and delivered this amazing event. And, the rest is history, as they say.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because that is certainly,
he's gonna hate it that we're talking so much about him like this.
Of course, I told him we were going to talk when he said today, "Oh, you're leaving work at 2 p.m. What are you and Omar going to talk about?" I said, "You," and I wanted to see what he said. But he, obviously the event where LSI was able to reopen its doors in the wake of COVID was certainly an inflection point in the business. But Scott summarized it. He made a LinkedIn post recently when we were talking about some of the transitions in my role and things like that. And he made a post around kind of the moments that defined LSI. And these moments, again, in my head, of course, in your head, a lot of it starts with that 2021 event, which became a really almost kind of like the like Bob Dylan goes electric in the history of music.
Yeah, that's
right.
Actually,
It's one that I think everyone kind of remembers in the industry. But there are moments of LSI that go all the way back to the 2008 financial crisis. Scott started the business and
in 08. When the world was on fire.
Right. And so
he had 2 little kids at home. And,
he's somebody, again, that in terms of as an entrepreneur, as an executive, as a mentor, he has, all the right things you want to learn from when you are a young man, when you're a young person in business, when you're in this industry trying to carve your path. Like he's got all the things that you want to learn from. And it's a pleasure now to kind of be able to step in at this point where, in his words, we're going through another one of those moments. We are now taking our, we've seen from that 2021 summit to what we just did in Dana Point in 2024 this past March. You can see the growth. You can see companies that were there in 21 raising initial capital
and
now
getting acquired.
Right. Now getting acquired or going public, raising growth capital. Even some of those people coming back as investors. And it's exciting to see that growth of the community. We're 3 years into the European event and now, really expanding that global footprint, heading to Asia and launching our first event. Yeah.
So now LSI's got LSI USA, Europe, and Asia.
Yep. And the Asia event will be in June in Singapore next year. And Singapore couldn't be a better spot for this. It's kind of coined as like this gateway to North and Southeast Asia, and for good reason. I mean, there's just a tremendous groundswell of innovation in that region, of capital that's becoming more sophisticated, being allocated both in the region and beyond, strategic presence in that region, manufacturing capabilities in that region. It's really a kind of a next frontier, I think, for a lot of the companies and investors and executives in the community that we currently serve. And the market is exploding. It speaks for itself. The Asia Pacific medtech market is growing at 2x the rate of US and Europe. It's tremendous to see what's happening there, and for us to now be able to complement our US and European event series with our first Asia event in 2025. We're really excited about the opportunity to serve both the community that we have today with a new offering to access that region and to broaden our reach in the community that we serve and bring this LSI experience, which has been so well received in our first 2 event series, to Singapore, China, Japan, Korea, India, Australia, New Zealand, and all the other geographies out there that we're serving.
That's going to be, it's super exciting. And before we dive into more details around that, and of course, like some of the market data we were going to discuss, So first, congratulations on the promotion.
Thanks.
And maybe just for me, out of my own curiosity, so you're VP of Growth and Strategy, now you're Chief Business Officer. What does that mean?
Yeah, I think it's a kind of a hybridization of operations and strategy. And to me and to, our team, first of all, this is not, just my accolade. It's really meant to, of course, it's a huge honor to be able to have that kind of individual recognition and have a title like that in a company like the one that we have. But what the Chief Business Officer title means to me is overseeing the growth and expansion, not just of the existing products and portfolios that we have today, making sure that those businesses continue to do what they're meant to do, which is serve our community to the best of our ability, but thinking about the 360 nature of LSI, its impact on the global medtech and health tech ecosystem. Where are there opportunities to bring new complementary lines of service to support the community better? Where are there opportunities to broaden the community that we're serving and bring new areas in, like what we're doing with LSI Asia? Where are there opportunities to expand access to things that we know the industry needs, but they may not have today, like our market intel products and services? And how do we continue to leverage LSI as best as possible for everyone that benefits from the business that we do today? So it is meant to both kind of, hybridize the ops and strategy function and give us the ability to continue growing in the areas that we know we want to grow in, from the core products that we build today for the community to the things and the aspirations that we have tomorrow of new channels for this content to reach people and help them make smarter decisions, more open source availability of resources and insights for the industry, more offerings that help companies that are even earlier stage, in the formation process before that first money in, and entrepreneurs that have exited and are looking for their next thing. So continuing to widen the aperture of who we can serve, where we can serve them, and how we, not just shake the bottom of the funnel to try to help more deals get done in the space and more activity happen from who's already in here, but how do we widen the top of the funnel with LSI? How do we bring new money into the industry? How do we help new companies get started? How do we help more people receive the value that's locked, in there, and do it all in a way that, we can continue to see growth as a business?
Yeah, and I love that because it aligns very much with my mission, and I'm excited to start our official partnership. We've had a unofficial partnership,
of course,
of always helping each other. But
I had legal documents drawn up. I don't know about you. If you hadn't signed them before this, that's your problem.
I think I might have signed them at the bar, at Dana Point. Dave Offer probably brokered that. No, but for me, with the podcast, one of the reasons why I started it was, aside from having a pulse on the industry and everything, I wanted an opportunity to make medtech great again. And part of that is that money is hard to come by these days, and I think that there's a lot of if you look at some a company like Tesla or some of these really transformational companies, first money in wasn't institutional VCs, essentially rich people who had vision, who were I'll throw money into something like this, right? Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I want to do with the podcast, and data is a big part of that, is how do we expand and extend the story of medtech to wealthy individuals, to family offices, and everything, people who are not in our industry, who say, yeah, you know what, we would like to fund a company like that. Maybe this medtech company is not a potential 100, 200x exit like a SaaS company or some random social media company, but we can take pride in the fact that we did some social good. We funded a company, and and I'm sure you'll agree with this, you can still make really good money with medtech deals.
Sure. I mean, look, there's
it's as John Norris says, our industry is not crazy, but it is a steady Eddie industry.
Sure.
And there's a pathway for acquisition.
I mean, yeah, we can get it. I mean, getting into that a little bit again. I'm a student of the kind of the venture investing and investing side of our business. And the more exposure I get to sophisticated medtech investors through the work that I'm doing now, the smarter I get and the sharper my knife becomes here. Yeah, 100%. Look, you're not going to find these you're not often, unless you were one of the few people that got to put money into Intuitive Surgical, you're generally not going to find these generational returns in medtech. Average exit valuation of, medtech and adjacent companies from 2000 to 2020 was about $350 million, right? Like that's what you're looking at in terms of an average. So if you're investing in medtech companies thinking that, you're going to turn around half your portfolio into billion-dollar exits, you're probably wrong, right? There's just no way around it. But it does beg the question, so then what? Because these technologies need financing and they make tremendous impact and they do create value. And we've seen that with, both the exits and acquisitions that have happened this year, the larger financings that we've seen. We're starting to see M&A turn back around a little bit right now. Edwards just put down $1.5 billion in M&A in the past 2 months. Stryker just acquired Molly Surgical, a company that's been presenting at our, events for the past couple of years. It's happening.
I gotta say, personally, I'm sure you share the same sentiment. I'm so happy to see the M&A activity start to go because, like in the last few years, like we've seen very few IPOs in our industry. The acquisition, environment hasn't been there, and it feels like the last year or so it's starting to pick up, and that gets me excited.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things in our industry for sure that is, I would not unique, but our industry is definitely characterized by strategic acquisitions, right? You may ask a question of all right, well, if the strategics buy out every company like Shockwave, for example, will we ever get another strategic? You think about Intuitive kind of was the newest strategic in our industry. But overall, I think everyone would agree, M&A is healthy, liquidity is needed, and that is an important thing to keep the venture ecosystem going. If there's no liquidity, then there's no returns for LPs, therefore there's no LP investment in venture. We need liquidity, M&A is an important path to do it. But, back to your point kind of around how you see your podcast kind of bridging a gap in access for alternative sources of capital, angels, family offices, that's something that we see as well happening. We're having more and more family offices, angel groups, and syndicates coming to our events. And I think one of the biggest things that we've seen with family offices is there's not just an access gap sometimes, there's a knowledge gap. If you're a family office that made your money in construction and now your youngest, the youngest member of the family wants to do well and do good and wants to invest in healthcare, it's a pretty big stretch to think that person's going to be able to just off the bat be like, yeah, this orthopedic implant company is going to be the winner in this space. That's a huge leap. Mm-hmm. So how do you bridge that access and knowledge gap for alternative sources of capital? It's a big thing. And there are a lot of creative organizations out there, finding ways to do that. And then there's also a lot of interesting financial models both at the strategic level and the investment level that I think are going to, over the next 10 or so years, drive kind of this new cadre of investors and companies out of this. We love working with the Orchestra Biomed team, for example, with their creative financial model. We have Duke Rowland giving a keynote at LSI Europe on his thesis published in HBR on the middle path to innovation, how you develop these high growth products in slow growth companies. And I think we're going to see more and more of these creative financial structures around medtech. You can even look at private equity's involvement. You see what KKR, Ajax, and Hologic are doing on the lung cancer side of things with Mavericks Medical. You see what Revival Healthcare Capital is doing. It's interesting to see these kind of unique financial models becoming more and more pervasive in the industry, and I think that will be, a healthy thing for medtech overall.
No, I want to kind of shift into talking about the market intelligence side of things. That's part of the reason why we have this partnership. I'm really excited about it, at least for my side, for State of MedTech and Khatib & Co. agency. I mean, we use the LSI Market Intel platform all the time. It's one of my favorite tools by far. But data is really important in this industry, especially considering, we talked about how fast the market's moving, how fast technology is changing. There's a lot of ambiguity in the market. And so data is becoming more and more important to help you at least guide the decisions that you're making. So can you kind of tell us more about that side of the business?
I think to understand that side of the business first, go back a little bit to, some of that early founding of LSI and what Scott and his team were focusing on. At the time, and when Scott has founded LSI, and still to this day.
And for context for the audience, we're talking about 2008, 2009.
Yeah,
correct?
absolutely. Yeah. LSI was founded as a boutique market research agency. And that concept of providing trusted market data to the people that needed it has always been at the core. Obviously, the events have become, a beast of their own business and their own center for relationships and partnerships. But at the core of that is market research. What you're seeing there is essentially an indexed coverage of the most exciting emerging technology companies, the motions and moves of, of the strategics, the trends and dynamics that the investors are capitalizing on. And that is, kind of the lived experience, earned insights from the horse's mouth type thing. And there's a lot of coverage of that in the industry, but what is not as pervasive and what needs to be more pervasive is the empirical trusted data. And going back to that founding of the company, that's where LSI, got its start in selling market reports and market data to the enterprises that needed it. Now, as the tools and technologies have evolved, so has the way we've packaged and positioned that market data. And that leads to our syndicated market intelligence platform today, which is really a one-stop shop for understanding global med tech and health tech markets without the need to purchase these bloated, unusable market reports. I think about when I was at J&J or Altoida, and if I was at Altoida and I wanted to understand I was looking into doing a partnership with a neuromodulation company in the space, having to find this market report and then throw down 10 grand to buy it. And then, I want to maybe understand the diagnostic side. And so I need to buy another market report and the methodologies don't line up. It's like, wait a minute, you're using a 5-year CAGR and you're starting in 2022, but I'm starting in 2023. Now it's all bad. This is really a data nerd problem, but anybody who uses market data today in their business knows this problem, and the people that aren't using market data should be. And so LSI's market intelligence business and our trusted platform is really at the center of what we do, and it's probably the thing you haven't heard that much about. So I can tell you a little bit about what's in this market intelligence platform. We track global surgical procedure volumes, over 200 different diagnostic and therapeutic procedures across 37 geographies, the US, Europe, APAC, MENA, and many others. And the idea there is really giving companies empirical data and projections and forecasts on the growth of different surgical and therapeutic and diagnostic procedures. We look at global medtech market analyses and projections across hundreds of different segments in orthopedics, cardiovascular, neurology, general laparoscopic surgery, aesthetics, dermatology, et cetera. So we're always, we are covering that broad index of the market with trusted unit volumes, worldwide sales data, share by supplier, et cetera. We break down more niche markets into smaller snapshots, which are meant to be digestible insights and data that executives can actually use, read, and act on. Like finally, these reports that you may buy, and if you want to understand the neuromodulation market, you may go buy a report. It's like 80 pages of nonsense.
Yeah, exactly.
It's ridiculous.
I bought one of those reports, and that's why I was like, I'm not doing this again.
Versus our market snapshot, comes from the trusted source that people know. It's LSI's in-house market research and analyst team. And in there, you'll find, the market, how we define it, what's included in it, what's covered. The market in 2023 was valued at $6.6 billion, and it's growing at a 7.7% CAGR from 2023 to 2028. You can use that. And when you think about it in context of the space, our partners at HSBC and John Norris, for example, releases his venture report.
Great report.
It's an outstanding report.
Shout out to John Norrison's team.
Absolutely. You take that financing data, you see the trend in neuromodulation, non-invasive neuromod, really receiving a lot of investment. Put that in context with what we've seen with Amber Therapeutics and their massive round for mixed urinary incontinence.
They just closed, what is a
$100 million from Intuitive
and that's a
Ventures,
Series
Oxford
A.
Science Enterprises, Lightstone, 8VC, F Prime, NEA. It's an incredible round, incredible momentum in that space. On the heels of Axonics' acquisition, you put that in context by understanding the broader market and understanding the white space around that market, right? No person, I don't care if you're somebody at a startup building the most, niche product in the heart valve space, you do need to understand the white space around your market, not only for you to make better strategic decisions, but also to understand how the people around you are making strategic decisions. What are the big strategics that may acquire a partner with you thinking? What are the investors thinking about and weighing? So this market intelligence platform is really an enterprise solution for the largest global institutions to get trusted market data and insights all in one place without the pain of trying to scour the web and find all these competing sources that you may not know. Look, with the advent of AI right now and ChatGPT, information is just so at our fingertips. But in a world overrun with information, finding the data and insights you actually need is like finding a needle in a haystack. And we help you find that needle much more effectively, and you can trust that it's a needle.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And you're absolutely right, because these days, there's even in the marketing side, there's too much data, and a lot of times you don't know, data can be very misleading, right? Just because data doesn't mean it's good data. And that was one of the things that I really enjoyed. And again, I'm excited for our partnership, because at least for our show, we've been using, this is kind of what started the conversation around our partnership, is that for the show we use some of those data insights, and I was like, I kind of want to be using more of this and publicly.
Yeah, it's a little bit addicting too. And so one of the things that we've recently started is an insights blog through LSI. Obviously, we have our events, we have the platform that you can purchase. But for those that are looking for consolidated insights in a really easy,
That's
digestible
in the blog
way,
newsletter, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
So we have a weekly newsletter that runs on Sundays where we interview one of the entrepreneurs in our community and then document their story, put it into context using market data. So when you have someone like Anna Makes from Neuroelectrics talking about their neuromodulation solution, we can put that in context with select market events, with the growth of the market, the overall market size, and analyst insights on that market. It's a really interesting read that goes out every Sunday and complements our weekly recap, which kind of top lines news in the industry. And then we're also doing a lot of both original research and community sourced insights. We just published an original piece on the APAC MedTech market, looking at the growth in that region and the top procedure volumes that are growing, certain procedures growing at over 10% CAGR, which is very significant. So we're seeing, we were able to document that and share that with the world as a snippet of how you can apply market data in your understanding of strategy. Who should be going to APAC? If you're a surgical company targeting one or more of those procedures that are rapidly growing in APAC, how's that going to affect your global strategy? That's the kind of data you need. We do expanded projects as well for companies, enterprise clients mainly, who come to us and they want to go deeper than what's in our syndicated platform. Or maybe they have a very hyper-specific need where they want to bring our analyst on as kind of an extension of their team. So we've done projects looking at everything from, projecting out the growth of undertreated, under-researched gynecologic procedures for a major surgical robotics company, over to looking at the, diligencing a personal protective equipment company in context of the broader market for a private equity firm. So our in-house analysts that are trusted by those large global enterprises, financial institutions, strategics, consulting firms to do that work are the ones that are building that platform and syndicating the data. It's really an incredible offering, and part of my mission of what I care about as a data junkie is how do we get this in the hands of more people? And I'm really excited about our partnership because you've built such an incredible community here. And I hope that anyone listening to this that is trying to make strategic decisions for their division, their team, their institution, et cetera, is thinking about being data driven and using that as a kind of competitive edge to win in the market. And I hope that they give our market intelligence platform a look.
Yeah, I'm excited to help push that out more and essentially get people to adopt it because I was talking to and I don't think he would mind that I mentioned this. So Dr. Michael Shuguru, who's actually you guys know each other.
Mm-hmm.
He's a neurosurgeon.
Omniscient Neuro.
Yep, that's co-founder Omniscient, and so he really cool technology over there. But he was showing me some data on the hospital operations and understanding like where they're not having full utilization. He showed me these charts, and I looked at him. I was like, "This is really impressive. I don't think I've ever seen any med tech company think like this." He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "There's a lot of things in our industry that people don't do." He's like, "Have you ever heard from either the med tech side or hospital side somebody showing like a demand curve or something?" Like, no. And so, I think part of the thing is that considering how much of our GDP is spent in healthcare, and the fact that so many major players are entering it, Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, et cetera, because they have nowhere else to grow. It's incumbent upon us for the people who are in this space to also level up on how we make decisions. Mm-hmm. Part of that is data, because I think the old way, because this is like such a metaphysical thing, but I try and understand why is our industry the way it is. And I think the old way that kind of is how the industry ran is that whether it is developing a new technology or getting it into a hospital, there's a point where you just have to take a battering ram against a wall. And that's always going to be there. But nowadays, it's not enough just to only do this, right? And this is where I think having better data and getting those insights as to say hey, for example, it's always been the quote unquote playbook of okay, we're going to go and get CE marking and launch in Europe, get some cases and everything, and then we're going to get ready for the big dance and come over to the US and go to the FDA. Well, that's not the case anymore. And
it's changing.
It's changing, and it may not be the best choice for your company. You mentioned that some of these markets that are growing at a 10% plus CAGR, right? It could be that your market for a really good exit, or at least to put yourself in a good position of leverage, might be, I don't know, like India or Australia or something else, right? You're not going to get that by guessing.
Absolutely.
And of course, no offense to anybody, but getting these, some of these reports are 80 pages long and everything isn't going to help either.
Yeah. I mean, look, McDonald's spends a ton of money on market research. And the thing they're looking for is, where should we put our restaurants? They spend so much money figuring out where to put McDonald's locations so that they will perform the best. If that much money goes into data for hamburgers and French fries, I don't think it's that far-fetched to think that we should be using trusted market intelligence in the process of building technologies that save and improve lives.
Oh, 100%. And I think it's interesting you mentioned that too, because I think even in the documentary and stuff, but it's a famous story that McDonald's, the founder Ray Kroc, realized that I'm not in the burger business, I'm in the real estate business. Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same. You could argue that it's probably the same thing for Starbucks.
Starbucks is in the banking business.
You know what? Can we take a little little adjacent off the path of MedTech? So because I want people to see why do we have such a good friendship, because it's not just MedTech, it's these kind of little excursions we go on to.
Starbucks has a digital app, and you buy gift cards and you load them into the app, or you load in your Starbucks bucks. I don't know how to drink coffee, but you load in your Starbucks bucks, and you've basically just given them $20 or $30. They just have this essentially interest-free loan from all their customers.
Right, that's just sitting, and it's in the billions of dollars, including
it's crazy.
How much? I don't know. I think you told me or somebody else told me that there's a certain a $10 billion worth of it that ends up not being used, or some crazy number.
Absolutely, they're a big bank.
Yeah,
it's awesome to see these kind of it's very interesting business wise to see what quote unquote business some of these organizations are actually in. And I will say, not to try and bring this back to MedTech, for example, but there is, we're going to have a really interesting keynote at LSI Europe in Portugal in September. with Alan Cohen from DCVC, and he published a thesis on what he calls kind of the tech med revolution, and it is about.
And I saw you guys made a post about this. Not
We did.
Tech med.
It's really interesting, and again, you can get lost in lingo world here with med tech, tech med, biotech,
As long
tech,
as we
biohealth,
define it
tech,
better than digital health.
Yeah, whatever it may be, but. The thesis and the thinking is really around the stark differentiation. Obviously, digital is here. AI is a major component of that. But there's a stark differentiation between a company where they are adding digital features or AI-enabled features on top of a traditional business model and trying to push that in versus a fundamentally digital or AI-first company where the value expands with the data as the core value proposition. An example would be like, let's say you are an implant company. Sure, I may be able to add digital features around that, but I'm still trying to sell you the implant. I'm not trying to necessarily sell you the value of the data like that is intrinsic to that product. So there's a fundamental difference. And anyway, I bring that up because it is interesting to see how outside of medtech, some of these businesses where like, yeah, McDonald's has, they sell all their burgers and their shakes and their fries and all that stuff. But yeah, a lot of their value is in real estate. And I wonder if similarly, we'll see if if the strategics are able to actually successfully adjust their core value proposition as this kind of wave and move away from the traditional individual device business.
Or even
shifts.
Or even the and a big shout out to our good friend Berk Toss, the CEO of Sentiar, who asked this question I think at LSI 2021, which was like, is it gonna be somebody from our industry, or is it gonna have to be somebody outside of our industry that comes in and comes up with a better business model than the razor blade model, because that's kind of starting to run its course.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I think like you can look at that in healthcare a lot and say, who's going to figure XYZ thing out? Is it going to be Medtronic? Is it going to be Apple or Google? Is it going to be some emerging startup? Is it going to be a fund that, incubates and develops? I mean, take self-driving cars, right? I participated in like a market research study for self-driving cars living in San Francisco. And it's one of the fascinating questions is, who would you buy a self-driving car from? Would you buy it from a traditional car manufacturer or dealer like a Ford? Would you buy it from more of like an electric car manufacturer, higher tech like a Tesla? Would you buy it from a self-driving software company like a Cruise, right? And it's a really interesting question. Like, if we're going to bring these to consumers at some point, who would you buy it from? And it's just kind of a fascinating discussion. And I don't know that there's one like clear answer, but similarly, we talk about this, this AI infrastructure. We see these new devices and technologies and the opportunity they represent for improved patient experience, improved clinician experience and efficiency, better outcomes, all this. Who is going to lead it is a really interesting question. Will it be the emerging companies with native expertise in that space? Will it be the large strategics with broad adoption of products across many indications, entrenched workflows? Will it be a larger technology company that succeeds with a push into healthcare? It's a fascinating topic for conversation, and these are the kinds of conversations that we love exploring at our events. And part of what goes into building, I think, a differentiated program in our industry is being willing to not just have the conversation of, here are 4 investors, let's hear what they care about, but to have these conversations where you're not getting a bunch of people on stage nodding and agreeing. Questions like the ones we're asking about here are going to lead to healthy dialogue. And I think that is really important for our industry, because I never once in my life have walked into any medtech space or room and been like, I know this. I think it's always meant to probe and to get people to think. I do love, one of our partners, the Mullings Group, Joe Mullings, obviously is a well-respected thought leader. And he always has said, his goal is not to get you to agree with him, right? It's to get you to think. And I think that is poignant and salient advice for anybody who's thinking about like the value of these kinds of conversations. You don't want echo chambers. You want to think.
No, I completely agree. And I think it's important for our industry to step back and be a lot, we demand this of our end users and our customers, which is to look at what you're doing and say, like, is there a better, more efficient way to do this for patient care? And I think we have to do this also on our side in terms of like business model innovation and valuations and everything, including the money that's coming in. This is a data point N of one, but, I spoke to one VC who mentioned that they are, in the middle of a rebrand to get away from blank and blank ventures to blank and blank capital, right? And,
I've heard of them.
Yeah. Yeah. And with the focus of like saying like, hey, like a lot of LPs, want to deploy their capital no longer to like early stage companies. They want to know that we're investing in like commercial and growth stage companies, right? And so again, I don't know if that's a trend, but let's assume it is, and you start to see less true venture capital. Where's the money going to come in, you think, to fund these early stage companies where they're essentially PowerPoint companies? Like they don't have a P&L or revenue to look at and everything. Is that going to come from strategics? Do you think it's going to come from family offices and private individuals? Like, what do you think?
Seed in medtech is hard. Seed in medtech is hard, especially in a world when the exit time horizons are longer than ever, and valuations have certainly been corrected, let's say, and liquidity, for the past so many quarters, years, has been hard to come by. I certainly don't have the definitive answer. We're excited to see early stage rounds getting done with a little bit more activity. Excited to see some acquisitions that are a bit earlier, which may open medtech seed a little bit back up. But, not to kick the can and avoid the question, but rather than take my answer on the question, I'd encourage that in Portugal, when you come to LSI Europe, you listen to the panel on this medtech conundrum where capital and liquidity are going to come from for that early stage, with Michael Wasserman of Elevage, Deanna from Panakis Partners, Alex Schmidt from Endeavor Vision, and David Kariakis from Wyndham Partners. So that, I think, will give you a really deep insight into how the investors are thinking about this, because even those investors, the fallacy is even those investors that want to invest in, price-controlled, de-risked commercial assets, like, you don't get a frog if it wasn't a tadpole at some point, right? Like you don't get de-risked commercial assets if they weren't at one point higher risk early stage assets. I do think part of that comes from, again, just an understanding of the exit value constraints, time horizons to return, and paths to liquidity that do make medtech seed particularly challenging. So I am really excited to hear the insights from those four investors that represent a breadth of geographies in the US and Europe, breadth of stages, of investing, and really deep expertise and understanding. They've seen many cycles. Michael ran HIG private equity, now is over at Elevage. I'm excited to have his perspective represented. And obviously we've heard from Deanna, Alex, and David on many different panels over the years, and all of them bring very complementary and discrete expertise that I think will make that a discussion that you don't want to miss.
I'm not going to lie. I'm getting, again, for like the third year in a row, like serious FOMO about LSI Europe. I might have to just do it this time. 'Cause I just feel, my parents are going to be overseas. I feel guilty about leaving my wife,
you don't have to feel guilty. We'll see you there in 2025, and we'll see you in Asia as well.
100%. 100%. What are you most excited about for LSI Europe? I know you love all your babies, but like, which panel? Which one are you most excited about? All the panels are great, which is why like LSI has this effect, which is like, there's like the Netflix and chill, but then there's like the LSI and chill, which is
After the event,
after the
watching the
event,
panel.
there's so many good things like discussions, panels, and everything that I missed. It like I had to carve out like a couple of weekends where I just sat down in my office and just like it was between my office and actually my living room where I was just like going through panels and like and pitches and everything. But what are some panels you're really excited about for Europe?
Yeah, some panels I'm really excited about. I think that it's going to be really exciting to hear Dr. Todd Britton from Edwards Life Sciences and Dr. Josh Mackauer. Their keynote is going to be fantastic.
Oh, that's a good.
Yeah. Marta from Nina Capital and one of her portfolio company CEOs, Christina, are doing a panel on how what value add truly means and how value add has to be a two-way street for investors and founders. And Marta, meeting her last year and hearing her speak with her co-founder of Nina, Mark, was incredible. And her insight into the mind of the founder and truly like that founder journey that you hear a lot about in traditional tech, but I think maybe sometimes gets a little washed out in the med tech world. I'm so excited for that panel. We also have Alexei, the founder of SIA, coming, and he's doing a panel with Todd, the COO of SIA, and then Lauren at Integra, who was on the corporate development side for the acquisition of SIA and now runs the business unit internally, and their banker from Bank of America. So that's going to be a really exciting panel on M&A, the good, the bad, the ugly, with, kind of rooted in lived experience. So those are just a couple that come to mind. I mean, with over 35 sessions, there's so much to look forward to. And one of the things that we're doing that I think has been really transformative in our approach to the agenda is really kind of tracking out and making sure that we're covering the breadth of topic areas that we know our community of executives both are excited to hear and need to hear. So of course we have panels, like the one moderated by Ryan of Verinex on what corporate strategic VCs are looking for in 2024. And I love that panel. You have Muriel from Intuitive Ventures. You have Colin Morrison from Boston Scientific. You have Neer from Mayo Clinic Ventures. You have a really exciting, representation of strategic venture executives on that one. And those are always highly informative for the entrepreneurs in the audience and the investors. But we also have panels dissecting a bit more kind of in the investor world, like how financial investors and strategics partner in investing in companies and on boards. And you've got that panel led by Nathan Harrington of Phillips Ventures. And then you have panels that are more on the company building dynamics, like how you train and support and mentor the next generation of entrepreneurs. And we have representation on that panel from folks like Adam Rosenwatch from Deerfield Catalyst, Dr. Gal Neumann from Lionbird, Shai Poliker from MedX Accelerator, Ashley Houston from Sante Ventures. So it's a really great mix. I can't say enough about how much of a team effort building a differentiated program like this is. It is really easy to build an okay program. It is super hard to build an excellent program.
It's true.
And we will never be satisfied. We'll always be soliciting feedback from the community, understanding how we can do it better, how we can do it more effectively, hopefully how we can do it more efficiently. So I as I'm operating across time zones, I can get a little bit of that time back. But it is probably my favorite thing that I get to do being in my role at LSI is work with this global community hand in hand so intimately, understanding the trends and dynamics that they're seeing in the market, the things that are topical for them, their portfolios, their community of founders, their strategic executives, et cetera. And cross-referencing that with our trusted market intelligence to really find those diamonds in the rough of where we can bring an idea or topic to light that needs to be explored. And that's, so it gives you a little bit of a flavor of some of the panels that we're excited about. And, we're talking a lot about panels and keynotes, which is great, but, we're going to have close to 200 early and growth stage company presentations as well. Companies that, I can't wait to see representing US, Europe, APAC, Canada, South America, Middle East and North Africa, really incredible syndicate of companies.
I completely agree. And I just realized something, and this kind of explains, because LSI every year outdoes itself, and the events are really fantastic, but the panels, the sessions you put together, It's so good. And I think it parallels very much with the same thing that you guys think, how you think and approach data. Again, this is why I'm excited about our partnership, is that, look, with data, just because you have data doesn't mean it's good. And just because you compile it and just drop it into a report doesn't mean it's of any value. It's the same thing with content. Just because you can make content doesn't mean it's of any value, right? It takes time to put good content together. So I think you guys have the same approach with these events that you bring to the data world, which is putting a lot of thought and effort into, okay, it's not, we don't want to just like make content or just have a stage and throw up some big names, and just because like, oh, you have the head of this place and this place, and because they're big names and they get together, it's going to make sense. But like very specific, like, what's the insight that you're going to get out of the content? Same thing with the data. Would you agree with that?
I think the connective tissue there is infrastructure. And what I mean by that is like, you can have great data and it can all be in some meaningless pile, right? But the infrastructure we've built around the market intel platform to be easily accessible and optimized for the executive and their teams. When I think about our market snapshots, right? Kind of juxtapose that with a bloated legacy market report. The market snapshot is infrastructure for trusted data and insights to be delivered to the executive in a consumable, digestible, usable way. Similarly, on the event side, we are blessed and fortunate to have access to such an incredible global community of investors, innovators, strategics, value-add ecosystem partners to draw from for these panels. Getting the right people in the room and on stage together is half the battle. You need the infrastructure that enables them to have authentic, creative, challenging discussions. The culture of the organization of LSI, we need to make that clear up front. The culture, or the vibe of the event needs to facilitate that, that kind of opportunity to let loose a little bit and maybe go off that script and not worry so much about hitting all these. It's more authentic and more the idea that the insights there are really to help the people in the audience, not just to kind of run out the clock. So I think that the connective tissue is infrastructure. It's not just about the cars themselves. It's the roads that you build, the highways that enable those cars to go fast.
All right. No, I completely agree. I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Of course.
As we round it out, we're going to have a little bit of fun. Got to have a little bit of fun. Okay.
Okay.
So I got some rapid fire questions for you.
All right.
I don't bring these out all the time, but for certain episodes, I'm like, it'll be worth it. Okay. So you can take as long as you want to answer these questions.
I'll go as fast as I can.
Or as fast as you want. It's up to you. Okay. So question number one, we talked a lot about the value of mentorships. We've mentored each other. We have great mentors in our life. And the important part of mentorship is not necessarily the advice that you're sometimes given, but more importantly, what are the painful things that you've been told that was kind of like a splash of cold water in your face? What was the most painful thing a mentor, it could be anybody, but mentor, whoever. What is the most painful thing that somebody told you that made you change for the better?
Yeah. Well, I guess on like a slightly humorous side, I loved playing. I was a decent soccer player when I was young, and I loved playing. And my position of choice was goalie. Doesn't really work at some point when you stop growing. So I was told, hey, you're not going to be a goalie for Real Madrid. I'm very sorry. That I think there is like a little bit of, there's definitely some humbling pain in that. I think, a mentor of mine when I was in college, I was told by a mentor of mine that I would not. So I did research in a lab after my freshman year of college, and I was working in the experimental biomechatronics lab at Carnegie Mellon.
It's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. It was run by this incredible professor, Dr. Steve Collins, who's now running the lab at Stanford, thought leader in the exoskeletons, human performance augmentation space. And I was doing truly that entry-level work, like watching somebody run in an exoskeleton and holding the emergency stop button just in case they fell, right? I was learning, and I got to do a lot of cool mechanical design and pick things up. But he had a postdoc student, I won't name the name, but postdoc student that I was working under. And the postdoc student told me, he was from Europe and he was doing his postdoc here. And he said, you're not going to succeed in a PhD, and that's not a bad thing. And I didn't really know what he meant, I guess, at the time. It was really painful because I went there, I was like, I'm going to be a PhD medical device researcher. That's what I'm going to do, right? I think, again, I'm an all-in kind of guy. So I get strong conviction. When I get strong conviction on that, I kind of put my head down. And I think this is one of the moments that it made a lot of sense. I'm fortunate to have extremely close relationships with my family, my father, my mother, my younger brother, who know me very well. And this is one of those things that, kind of in the conversations with them, I came to realize, like, okay, you know what? Like, this path is probably going to be closed to me. I'm probably not going to do the things or be good enough at the things that would necessitate me to be an academic PhD, right? But that isn't necessarily a bad thing. And, I think it kind of turned into part of where the direction I went now. I think about the things I love doing, creating content, speaking with people, building relationships, moderating panels, like getting to do those things that I get to do as part of my job at LSI. I wouldn't have probably gotten to do any of those things if I was a PhD and that had been my career path. So it worked out the way it should. But, at the time it was certainly painful. Like when I was looking to return to the lab, he was like, no. That was the first time that I had really gotten a no like that.
It's a good story. I love that. I didn't know that about you.
Now you do.
Now I do. All right. Next question. By the way, these aren't really rapid fire. I'm just realizing.
You got it. They can be rapid.
Yeah. What is a book that you feel that you gift or recommend most often?
It's a book called Range. It's a book about how generalists tend to outperform specialists in the long run. And the author had previously done research on how multi-sport athletes that play multiple sports when they're growing up, tend to excel at the sport that they choose to go pro in later, more so than athletes that focus on one sport for their entire life. And that thesis was then expanded in this subsequent book called Range to the business world, the world of politics, law, finance, of people that develop a breadth of skills and a breadth of mental models and frameworks for how to think and approach hard problems, as opposed to those that laser in and specialize on one thing. I think for a while, today, I can own my story and speak very eloquently about it. But, when you're in college and you go to a school like Carnegie Mellon, where you've got kids from their sophomore year of college, they're interning at Facebook or Microsoft or Google or Amazon, and that's all they want to do. They know what they're doing. Their charted path is there. They're software engineers. And you're kind of like, all right, well, I'm academic research, medical devices, maybe I'm going to be a mechanical engineer. Then you go to your sophomore summer engineering internship. You're like, all right, that's probably not for me. But I gained, what experience did I gain that I really liked? Human factors, UI, UX design, product, that can make sense. You go do that. You're like, I don't know if that's really what I wanted. You're going through that. And it was like I read this book that was kind of like written for me almost. So I think Range is one of the most incredible books, and I highly recommend it to anybody, particularly those that maybe see a little bit of themselves in a nonlinear career path, multifactorial or multifaceted interest set, even interested in multiple industries or domains. I find it to be a book where you really will see yourself in the writing and the research, and it will not only put you at ease, but help you lean into and own that unique about yourself.
I love that, and it's something that definitely resonates with me too. I think this is something that we both shared. And I remember when you were trying to sort of find your path. You were very you were struggling with it because you're like, what is the thing? But you just stood in the pocket of okay, I'm going to try this thing, that thing, and what you didn't know, and I think we can both look back and connect the dots, is that you were building this as my buddy Scott Adams likes to say, you're building this skill stack, right? That only Henry Peck has, And I think, again, in a world where so many things are changing stuff, if somebody wants to just laser focused on being an engineer or being a doctor and everything, that's fine. But I think the other side is that if you don't know, that there's nothing wrong with going and trying new things and saying, okay, I'm gonna do like a sabbatical doing this thing. This might be the thing for me. Oh, it's not great, but now I have that skill stack. For me, I think some of those things in the past were like, being a product manager. I learned very quickly. That's not for me, but I have that skill stack.
I think there's a time for focus and there's a time for decisiveness. Like focus is really important. There's so many cool, exciting things out in the world that you could be doing right now, Omar. Medical device companies where you could go run marketing, or business lines that you could pursue outside of this thing, all these things. And I think it's really easy to get distracted. Focus is a very important skill and a muscle that you build. At the same time, like decisiveness is important too. If you know that being a product manager is not the right thing for you, and you know that, being decisive about that, understanding what it adds to your skill stack, and then moving to the next thing, I think that's where people kind of get caught in limbo, is they are not on the right end of the spectrum of focus and decisiveness. Like they either maybe are kind of open and get a little distracted, and they're not decisive enough to either like pursue this new opportunity or really focus on what they're doing. And that's like the kind of the 50%, the half measure that you don't really want to be in my opinion.
No, I completely agree. All right, last question as we round it out. Easy one, fun one. So you and I share love of just buying cool stuff. Amazon stuff and everything. What's a cool Amazon purchase that you made? It doesn't have to be Amazon, but like cool purchase you made that's under $100, super cool. You love it. What comes to mind? Okay,
this one's kind of weird, but
even better.
I don't know actually if it's weird. But there are I'm I like to like run out of the house when I'm not late, but I'm usually like a back-to-back guy, right? So if I have a meeting like 5 minutes from my apartment or something, I'll leave like 4 minutes before the meeting starts, kind of thing. Like I'm scheduled tight. But I hate putting on shoes. It's like one of my biggest pet peeves. It's why I love wearing loafers, because I hate tying the laces. Yeah, I hate that. So there are like these laces on Amazon that you can buy that look like normal laces, but they stretch like as if they were they turn your shoes into slip-ons.
Oh.
And you would never know that they're slip-ons because they look like it, but you just tie the knot once and you just leave it there, and then you just like stretch the tongue out and you can slip your feet in.
Oh,
one of my favorite things that I own.
Yeah, because usually the ones that I've seen in the past make it look like they're self-tied. I never.
No.
Oh, so this actually makes it look.
Yeah, I don't want to look like a toddler on the beach.
Exactly. That's my problem. It's like I've seen some of them and they're like, oh, it's tech. I'm like, no, you look like a toddler. You know? So
absolutely.
Okay.
I know we're about to wrap up. There is one thing I wanted to make sure I get out on the show, because it's a main focus I know of you and I, and of Scott as well. And that is, again, like, I think from a young age, obviously, I knew that I never knew I'd be doing this, but I knew this was the world of technology and people that I would be in. I think that we do a bad job marketing medtech to young people, and particularly those in college. And, I think about like living in San Francisco. I think about my drive from SFO to my apartment. And what do you pass when you're driving on the highway in San Francisco Bay Area up towards the city? You pass like Twilio, Ask Your Developer, and like Apple's new iPhone camera, and all these kind of like SOC 2 compliance from Vanta, all this stuff, which is super important and very impactful. Consumer technology, infrastructure technology, B2B SaaS, all important industries. And we rely on a lot of that at MedTech. Think about the amount of MedTech companies that leverage the smartphone as a platform for their diagnostics, data collection, patient engagement, et cetera. So I understand those industries are extremely important. It is not a bastardization of those industries. But very seldom do I go and, like, when I talk to young or early career professionals that are highly motivated in university and maybe a technical career path or even outside of technical, that are thinking about medical device as an area where they could work, or health tech as an area that they would work. And I just wonder, what is the way to get more of the world's smartest people focused on solving the world's biggest problems? And not that all the world's biggest problems exist in healthcare, but a lot of them do. And I hope that that's something that kind of becomes a rallying cry in our industry, and collectively we start finding better ways to reach the next generation of entrepreneurs and accumulate and pool talent in these innovation hubs and universities, or even earlier than that, when people are, like malleable and finding interests and exploring. I would never say that we push people into something that they don't want to do, but I want it to be an option that people see and understand for all that it is. And I think about my conversations with people that work in different industries, different companies that are very fulfilled and very happy and satisfied. I think about how fulfilled and satisfied I've been when I was at Exobionics, strapping an exosuit onto someone who came into our facility in a wheelchair and then stood under their own power. And I think about how, all the way up to now, how fulfilled I am when I hear about a company that just, that's presented at our events, raised capital, and has now just done its 1,000th case with patients. I think there is nothing like the fulfillment you get from this industry. There's nothing like the people that work in this industry that are also motivated by that. And I hope that as an industry, we can find more ways to get the next generation of truly innovative, special thinkers and disruptors and company builders and financiers and team executives and whatnot motivated by that prospect of having an impact in an industry that is evolving, exciting, dynamic, albeit very challenging and hard. There's a lot of easier ways to make money than to do what the people in our industry do. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to work in the industry. Hope we can find ways to bring more people into it, and grateful for the opportunity to chat with you, my friend, on the mic. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. I mean, this has been a long time coming. We were like way overdue for this. It won't be the last time, but again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you, of course, for your friendship, not only with me but also with my family. We're very grateful for you.
Of course, absolutely. Let's get some sushi.
Let's do it. Awesome. Thank you all for listening. Be sure to go and do a couple things. Number one, go check out LSI. Their European Congress. It's not European. Their LSI Europe is coming up. Go check that out. There's still tickets for that. And of course, if there's one thing I can guarantee you, every year that I will be at, unless somebody died or my wife is giving birth, I'll be at LSI USA in Dana Point every spring. So make sure you go get your tickets for that. I'm your host, Omar M. Khatib. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast, give us 5 stars, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who would really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.